Talk about whether reopening the infamous Alcatraz prison is possible is still trending online after U.S. President Donald Trump said he was directing the Federal Bureau of Prisons to rebuild and reopen the island penitentiary to house America's most ruthless and violent offenders. But many say it'll cost too much to bring Trump's plan to fruition.
I think it's one of the stupidest ideas I've ever heard in my life. It would cost billions of dollars to refit this.
After U.S. President Donald Trump began floating the idea of rebuilding and reopening the Alcatraz prison in the San Francisco Bay, many are speaking out that it's a bad idea, including tourists who visited the site.
You can't even come up with a more colossally bad fiscal idea. Nothing about this makes any sense.
We're from Australia and we're derived from convicts, but this is inhumane.
Alcatraz, which housed notorious U.S. criminals such as Al Capone, was closed in 1963 because it was too expensive to continue operating, in large part due to its island location. That's according to the Federal Bureau of Prisons website, which also adds that it was nearly 3 times more costly to operate than any other federal prison.
You have to remember the building was constructed by military prisoners from 1909 to 1911. They weren't the most professional construction workers around, and so the building was always somewhat compromised. By the time the Bureau of Prisons came in 1934, it was already an old institution.
The site is now operated by the National Park Service as a tourist destination.
The Park Service, when we took over the island in 1973 to open to the public, there were no functioning utilities at all on the island. Even today, water comes from the mainland. There's no sanitation. There's no running water, no sewage. All the garbage and human sewage has to be hauled off the island by boat. Many of the buildings that are standing are essentially stabilized ruins. A few buildings have been rehabilitated for use like warehouse, but the big prison building itself, it's got some serious structural problems that would have to be addressed.
It draws more than 1 million visitors a year and generates around $60 million in revenue. It was designated as a National Historic Landmark in 1986.
It represents something very strong, very powerful in terms of law and order. Our country needs law and order. Alcatraz is, I would say, the ultimate.
But after Trump said he's directing officials to reopen the infamous prison to house America's most ruthless and violent offenders, even former inmates are worried.
No, I don't think he really wants to reopen it. He's trying to draw attention to the crime rate. When I was on Alcatraz, a rat couldn't survive.
Rebuilding isn't as easy as it sounds.
And listening to the president, it's unclear if he's talking about rebuilding the existing historic prison and making it functional again to lock up people, or some vision of tearing down the historic buildings on the island and constructing an even new complex. I'm not a contractor or an estimator, but I think the first thing you'd want to do is get out and take a look at the existing structures and utility systems and find out what, if anything, could be saved.
But it's not the first time this idea has come up. According to USA Today, in 1981, the island was among a list of more than a dozen locations evaluated when the Reagan administration looked for a place to hold thousands of Cuban detainees during the Mariel boat lift. But the site was rejected because of its conditions and historic nature. More recently, earlier this year in January, Trump's son praised his father's move to house thousands of immigrants at a facility in Guantanamo Bay, saying maybe we should also reopen Alcatraz. Attorney General Pam Bondi also referred to the site today during an announcement about a massive drug bust and where the suspects could go if convicted.
Most of these individuals, if convicted, will remain in American prisons. Perhaps Alcatraz.
But whether Trump will follow through with this idea, we'll have to wait and see.